Learn to be super successful. Subscribe to my channel, Meathead. And as he said also in Germany, the licensing is a bitch. And not dissimilar to other parts of the world. I can't speak, we haven't done assisted living in certain parts of the world, but for most parts of the world, it's pretty much the same. Pretty much the same. Questions about, yes, sir.
He spoke about KFW or something about the banks had called him about guaranteed money. Where was
yeah,
what
well,
was
that's a secondary loan source that exists in Germany, where they have guaranteed government money, and so they call, and once you do deals, they start calling you, and so they called him, and so now since he filmed that, he's closed a couple more deals, and he's still got 3 deals to close, so he'll finish the year with about 10 deals, more or less. And but as of the last deal, I told you, to his account, not at exit, but on paper, he's accrued to him 7.83 million euros. 7.83 million. Call it, he's done 8 deals. It's about a million deal, but the first 3 or 4 deals were little deals. That's why it's not more than 8 million. And now he's cranking, as he should be, and he's going to the whip like a jockey, and I'm sure that won't be the only banker that calls him about the money. And now, different scale when the head of banking for one of the big banks sat in my library and said, "Hey, I'm 770 million pounds underinvested. How can you help me?" Now, I've done a lot more deals than he's done, but and once you get a reputation, and it doesn't take long, because there's not that many guys that make rain. Can make it rain. You will get inundated with financial institutions, and a lot of them will be private equity, which you don't have anything to do with. And you'll find when I'm 10 times bigger, maybe I'll sell to you, but leave me alone for now. Yes, sir.
Can we talk about lead generation sources for a minute? I know
Sure.
cold calls and emails are free, but obviously there's other ways to solicit business. Like,
Correct.
ever do mail-outs? Do you find those are effective?
Okay. Well, it's small, but I'll mention it now. In different parts of the United States, what I call rural areas, we've got guys doing deals in Wyoming, Montana, that send out 300 or 400 mailers, the old simplest postcards, the old thing, have you thought about selling your business? And they've got as high as 25% response. 25% response. And then, of course, you follow up.
What about Google AdWords?
I haven't seen that be successful. That doesn't mean it isn't successful. But the net scum of you that are in the net scum business, e-commerce and that kind of shit, but we haven't had anybody that has been successful enough to where it's filtered back to me that I know. Go ahead.
Obviously, some of these companies you're going to be contacting are not going to be mom and pop when you're working through the list, the state license list, or wherever you get your list from, depending on your industry. So you're going to get a gatekeeper, not the owner.
Okay.
When you call, what are you typically saying to get by the gatekeeper?
You're going to hear Josh get through a gatekeeper. He's going to give a role play. We've got a role play for that. But you want to talk to the principal, the decision maker, the owner. That's who you want to talk to. And I'll cut to the chase before you even listen to Josh. You're calling reference a potential joint venture, not to buy the business. And 70-80% of the time, you'll get through the gatekeepers, because joint venture means business for them. When you talk about buying the business, they can your call, and the owner, the principal, the founder never hears about it or sees it. So it's joint venture. And 70-80% of the time, you'll get past the gatekeeper. Yes, sir.
At what size company do you typically go from just an internal due diligence to a quality of earnings report?
Okay, I don't want you to buy anything more than $1 or $2 million dollars or euros that is bigger than that, because you're more likely to make a mistake internally, and then when you fuck up, you've got nobody to sue for malpractice. So anything roughly more bigger than $2 million, you want your outside auditors to handle the due diligence. Now, in addition to your due diligence, the bank's going to do due diligence. The bank's going to have a quality of earnings. So you get a double check, okay? Now, what can go wrong is sometimes, especially when you're doing it yourself, and you're not having an E&Y or a BDO, you don't call it a quality of earnings. Your quality of earnings will not match the quality of earnings of the bank, because the bank has gone deeper. And so that's why for more than a couple $1 million or a couple £1 million or a couple million euros, I want the quality of earnings coming from a reputable large accounting firm. And frankly, they are doing it every day. They're in the business, whereas the guys on your board may not have done stuff like this in 10, 20, 25 years. And occasionally, laws have changed. Certain things, not, straight line amortization hasn't changed in 50 years. But I mean, certain things change. And so you want the cutting edge opinion, and that cutting edge opinion will come from your accounting firm. And the lawyers have a different due diligence, okay? But it's not, they don't call it quality of earnings, but you're going to have them check contracts. Just because they say they have a 3-year contract with the Air Force doesn't mean they've got one. And in certain parts of the world, in certain ethnicities, they will list all kind of shit and they don't own any of it. They don't own any of it. So the bigger deals, where you have more liability and you're buying property, buildings, and the rights that come associated with those, you want to make sure that somebody has gone through the documentation carefully. Now, you understand, an audit doesn't mean they look at every single piece of paper. Even a full-blown official audit by a big accounting firm, they spot check every 5th document, every 8th document, something like that. And when they're the tens of millions and hundreds of millions enterprise value, they may only check every 100th document or every 200th document because they don't have time. They don't have time. Another question? Okay, in the back.
So when I do asset-based purchase, I don't get the license, right? And when I buy the stock, then I get the license, right?
Okay. Okay. Share deals are easier, not just the least reason he just gave, because documents and licenses can transfer easily. We would rather buy assets because there's no past, current, or future liability. But some of the purchases, as he said, he's made 2 asset purchases and I guess 4 stock purchases. And it will depend, and your lawyers and your accountants and your board will be able to ascertain, is it worth the risk? And just because of the licensing, it's a good reason to do share purchases. Now, we've had one guy that didn't adhere to that, and it took him, almost a year to get the licenses passed. Because they do really stringent, especially when things are drug related, they do their due diligence. They actually go back and they, have you been arrested for drunk driving? And it doesn't keep you from getting the license, but you got to explain. And they may only be able to talk to you in 3 weeks. So that pushes off the close. But where you can, you always want to buy assets. You want assets as long as there's no transfer of licenses. And in the German case, as Andrea said, when you buy assets, you have to the employees have to approve it and go off of that crap. You don't know what they're going to approve. And if there's any union involvement, the union will kill it. They won't until you sit down with them and renegotiate their contract. Yeah. No, it was losing money vis-a-vis where they were, but they still weren't losing money. So we're not in the turnaround. Just stay away from turnarounds. Down the back.
So if I buy the assets, what about the reputation, the employees, and the name of the company?
You don't have it. You're buying the asset. You're not buying the brand name, you're buying the asset. Then it's your job to rebrand it. Well, the employees may or may not come to work for you. Well, I don't consider any employee asset. I'm the only asset that was, they may consider themselves, and I assure you the unions will consider them assets. And for those of you that haven't dealt with unions, I've broken 2 unions at big organizations that I bought, and they play hardball. But the use of a union, in the United States, there used to be a little less than 6 million members of unions in the United States. Now there's less than 2 million. I rest my case. If they were so fucking important, they killed Jimmy Hoffa and they put him in the cement mixer for a reason. I mean, he used to be the head of the Teamsters Union. The unions are disruptive. They're disruptive, yes, sir.
So, like, for instance, when you're rolling up those assisted livings, are you rebranding them all under one brand, or are you leaving them as standalone brands that you're...
It depends. Some of them, it doesn't matter because, it's Dan's assisted living, Joe's assisted living, RV and Margaret's assisted living. When you get to bigger, when you've got 25 or 30 of them, you can impose a brand then. But for the smaller ones, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because upon exit, your exit, and remember, when I talk about exit, I'm talking about your exit. I'm not interested in anybody else's exit. I'm talking about when you hit the cash register and the money comes out. And let me spend a minute here. IPOs sound terrific, the glamour. But if you have $100 million enterprise value, and even though that's a small end that would take public because it's even numbers, we'll use that. The investment bank that you're going to hire, or banks that you're going to hire, investment banks you're going to hire, first of all, they don't want founders to sell stock ever. As I mentioned a day or two ago, because it shows like you have lost confidence or you're not there for the long haul. Okay. At most, if they let you sell shares, they're going to let the group of you, not just you, and you're going to have vastly more shares than anybody else. They're going to let you sell maybe 10% of your shares. 10% as a group, okay? And so if they 10% and you own 60%, that means 10% of 100, 6 million of the sold shares and 4 million of the other founders. Now, that looks bad to the prospective shareholders. So instead of pro rata or pari passu, which is the right way, they may say you can only sell a fifth of what everybody else sells. So they can balance the numbers. So all the shares that are being sold aren't yours. Okay, so but for this example, let's say that you can sell 5% of your shares. The other 95% of your shares are going to be part of the total share capitalization, the float, okay, that exists. So your shares, let's just say it's $1 a share to make it easy. So it's 100 million market value. So you're going to have being able to sell 5 million. You put in your pocket, you pay capital gains tax on, and the 95% of your shares are going to be liquid in a market that you can't sell. Now, there's a thing in America, it's called stiff stock, meaning you can only sell your shares under Rule 144. In other words, the Security Exchange Commission has to give you permission to sell the stock. And until then, it's restricted. And some investment banks will restrict your stock for a year, some 2 years, some 3 years, which is horseshit. Okay, so the IPO is not the gilt-edged panacea that you hit the cash register. But there's obviously a QLA butt-fuck way around that. And the QLA butt-fuck way around it is, and I think I mentioned this, on your stock certificate and in the documentation, you have to be able to hypothecate or borrow against your stock. which means, and that's what fucked up the real estate market in Silicon Valley, because for several years before Facebook went public, everybody had stock, and there was a secondary and a tertiary market for Facebook stock. The same with Google, et cetera. And that's why the $500,000 house is now $3 million, because all the kids piled in, they borrowed against their stock, they made it liquid, and they bought real estate. So now you want to be at least able to borrow against the stock, and the word is hypothecate. You want to be able to leverage, so you can start living large sooner than later. Sooner than later. Now, there's only 4 times you can sell it. Now you've got stock, and you get beyond the dead period. In other words, they're going to restrict your ability to sell the stock for a year. So now we're in the 13th month. Okay. There's only 4 times you can sell stock, or actually 8. A month before you report earnings. In America, they report earnings 4 times a year. A month before you report earnings, and a month after you report earnings, 4 times. That's 8 times. There's a window you can sell stock. So you have to say, I'm going to sell stock. Now, there's a way around that, too. Bill Gates has been selling stock almost every month for the past 35 years because of estate planning. They will not hinder you from selling shares if it's because of estate planning. So Bill has gotten around this for decades now. He's not the only one. He's the most famous one for estate planning. But in Europe, or at least in England for sure, they only report earnings twice a year. So there's 4 dead periods. It's before they report earnings the first time, and after a month each side, and again the second time you report earnings, a month before and a month after. But the same thing, they're a little less tight with your ability to get out of holding stiff stock. When I went public here, my stock wasn't stiff for 1 day. Of course, I knew all this. I knew all this when I came in, and I made sure that all the documentation was written properly. Properly because it favored me. And in your case, properly is going to favor you. Pardon? Yes, that's correct. And when you're talking to your lawyers, when you talk to your in-house lawyer, and you mention these things, they're going to think you're smarter than you are, because not many people know all this. And then it's his job to go back and not sell because you have the right to force. This is what I want. I want no longer than first, you don't want it to be restricted at all. They're not going to do that. I don't want my client, you, or my partner, because I'm on the board with you, I'm the lawyer, more than a year. I want it to be stiff more than a year, no more than a year. And I want to be able to hypothecate it so they can borrow against it. And but if you don't ask, you don't get. And one of the things, the guys that just it's not funny, take the material from the website, that's not on the website. So we've got guys that have gone public that haven't come here, haven't paid the old man, me, and they've gone public and got fucked in every hole they have. Because it's not to their interest to tell you that you want to be able to leverage your stock. It's not in their interest to tell you you don't want stiff stock for you. Because we have guys that have gone public in the last 5, 6, 7 years that it's virtually impossible for them to get out of the stock. Because if you own 40, 50, 60% of the public float and you sell a quarter of it, your stock is going to be halved in price. It'll be in half, 1/2, or even if that much. And so the special sauce, the non-YouTube sauce, because you want to be able to change your lifestyle as quick as humanly possible. And you will with your ability. Now, even though IPO sounds more glamorous, and you probably get a higher multiple. Let's say you're buying 3 to 5 or 4 to 7, you go public at 15 to 20 times EBITDA. But you can't get your money as quickly. Whereas if you made a strategic sale to a strategic buyer, he may not give you 18 or 20 times EBITDA. He may only give you 14 or 15 times EBITDA, but all the money comes at once. Yeah, and the tax liability. Sally says the reason why that a lot of the billionaires don't want to come and help me is because they're running from the tax authorities. And Sally used to be one of the senior people on the E&Y tax desk in London, so these guys, they don't want the IRS or the Inland Revenue or whatever the taxing authority in your country is called, which there may be some truth in that. So strategic buyer, IPO, and in between, depending on 100 million, you'd wait too long for 100 million, but when you get up to 50 million, you might want to sell to a private equity, because private equity is an easy way to double and sometimes even triple your money without going all the hassle. But the private equity guys are going to want you to stay on. Now, they want you to stay on to run the business. All the private equity firms have a built-in board in-house for healthcare. But if through your leadership you got from 0 to 50 million, in a couple of years, then they'll probably want you to stay for some interim period of time. And they won't give you all your money. They'll give you a toid. They'll give you a third now, a third when you leave in 2 or 3 years, and then a third down the road. You don't want that. And then you will also have covenants and restrictions from being in the same business again. You have to, they call them green leaves here, I think, where you can't be in that business for 1 or 2 or 3 years. So the strategic buyer is a better purchase candidate because they won't be as restrictive as a private equity. And even though you may get more money to show on your net worth statement because the enterprise value will be higher because the public market will be higher, but there's a lot of restrictions going public now. Plus, I never worried about it, but the expense. It's expensive to go public now. $100 million, easily, you could run up $10 million in expenses, $100 million offering. Easily run up $10 million in expenses. Which, remember, you got no money in it. It's monopoly money. It's toilet paper. So there's different. And your board members, even though your vote is more than all their votes, your board members will, they will have horror stories for all the 3 methodologies I just told you about hitting the cash register and getting liquid with your company. They will have horror stories for every one of them because they should have been. Because that's why you recruited him. He's been involved in 9 public IPOs, this, that. That's why you recruited him. They'll know, and their experiences with these 3 exits will be more current, hopefully more current than mine, because they are in the trenches right now. But these aren't problems. These are all how good is the best one or how bad is, and it depends. It also depends on market liquidity. And when you go public, you want your investment bank, and you're going to interview investment banks. Remember, it's a beauty contest. You're going to interview these guys. You're going to interview 5 or 10 of them. And not just the chemistry, but who's going to give you the best deal. And the most important thing is who's going to support you in the aftermarket. Talk's cheap, it takes money to buy whiskey. In other words, when it comes out, and if there's no buyers, who's going to not pump it up, but support the price? Goldman Sachs is the best supporter in the aftermarket in the history of the Wall Street. And then there's bulge bracket, which means the top 5 or 6 companies. And then there's second tier bracket. But you want, and 100 million is probably too small for a Goldman Sachs deal. JP Morgan's good. Morgan Stanley's good. But you want somebody to support your stock in the aftermarket. So it comes out at $20 a share. It doesn't drop to $6. And you talk about at what point will you support? At what point are you going to commit funds to buy our stock? And these are questions that your board that have been through public offerings and your accountants and lawyers should have your back, for real have your back, because they've been there. And you get Goldman Sachs to support in the aftermarket. It's a way. They say the deal's a way. They still fuck up deals once in a while. Of course, you'll go do Goldman Sachs and they'll fuck you, and then, Peña, he fucked me. The first time that the one deal in Goldman Sachs portfolio in 86 years, they didn't support the aftermarket. But for the most part, those big firms, because it's their reputation, it's their brand. They want you to come to them for these big deals, these IPOs, because they support you in the aftermarket. And then there's another, who's going to make a market in your stock? So who is going to handle the book? What market maker is going to make a market in your stock after the IPO, after Goldman Sachs, supports you maybe 30 days, 45 days? And there are good market makers and bad market makers, and they change. Ideally, you want Goldman Sachs to continue to make a market in your stock forever. And then, you're not set, but you know that there won't be any mistakes in supporting your stock. So all these things, and that's why I tell you, your board members, the accountants and lawyers will have people on board, outside accountants and lawyers will have people on board that know the answers to all these questions. You want your board members to have lived through this, so they know. You don't need to know. We've got guys doing this that don't know shit. But on Andreas's board, let's say he decides to go public on the Frankfurt Exchange. 3 of us on the board have been through public offerings before. I've never been through one in Germany, but I've certainly been through a couple in Europe. And so you don't have to know that. And if you had to know all the things that all the board members knew, you'd never get around to pulling the trigger. And that's the kind of questions you ask. 4 or 5 of you have asked questions I've never heard of in 50 years. Forget that I've ever done. I've never heard of even in 50 years. And I've been doing this a long time all over the world. Yeah. Mike.
You mentioned exiting to PE, IPO, and selling out to a strategic partner. The last one, that's the one that won't hold us back into staying into the deal. Is that correct?
No, the strategic partner may or may not. But it's least likely a strategic partner will want you to stay. They just want you to exit. They want you to exit right or left, just get out. But the private equity and you can't just walk away from the IPO. I mean, you're there. You're there, and there's a de minimis amount of stock that you can sell. Now, I sold stock because I had such an overwhelmingly large amount. I sold stock for estate planning from not day one, as some of my colleagues accused me of, but certainly within the first 60, 90 days, because I had a large overhead, and my salary wasn't commensurate with my overhead. And then, I sold stock, and that we were dividend payers, and some of the other shareholders would complain, and the Financial Times wrote about it a few times. I got 60% of the dividend. So when we paid 10 million pounds of dividend, I got 6 million pounds. And they said the only reason Peña's paying a dividend is to line his own fucking pockets. And my retort, my counter was, we wanted to be an orphans and widows stock, and orphans and widows funds can only invest in dividend-paying stocks. And it's one of the reasons our share price was supported so much is because of the dividend payment. And as soon as they threw me out, they cut the dividend. The stock went, yeah, and then they blamed it on me. I said, if you cut the dividend, but they didn't want to. The new management didn't want to, it stuck in their throat to pay me a dividend. So they just cut the dividend, and the stock fell like a fucking rock on top of Saddam Hussein and this, and then the stock never really recovered. Yes, sir, in the back.
Can I just buy a shell company and
No.
merger myself
No.
with them? Why?
Because, I'm telling you, no, I've been doing this 50 years. Buying a shell company is a stupid idea.
And to merger?
No, I know what you're saying. See, you want to preclude all this and buy, no, because there's never a clean shell. Some fucking, Herman Goering living in Tel Aviv is going to sell you a shell that's clean, and it's not clean. And 100 shareholders are going to pop up and say, Where's our money? No, shell companies don't work. I've been doing this a long time, and I've heard it from everybody and his brother. No. The drug cartel, Medellin drug cartel, wanted to shove all their assets in a shell company and take it public. It would have been the fourth or fifth largest IPO in the history of the world. And if you pay lawyers enough money, you can find a lawyer who will say that's a good idea. But I knew it was a bad idea. I said, I suppose you want to make the Pope the chairman. The Vatican, well, maybe not the Pope, but how about the head of the Vatican Bank? We can make him chairman. Who just came back from exile, he was just found not guilty for being a pedophile. The former head of the Vatican Bank, Cardinal, what's his face? I forget what his name is. And my aunt, and all the stories about the Vatican Bank are true. And they're only covering the surface. The guy that was my entree, the controller of the Vatican Bank, Giuseppe something or other, was going to testify at the House of Commons, and somehow, testifying on Monday, somehow on a Saturday morning, they found his body hanging from Tower Bridge with his legs tied with barbed wire, his hands tied with barbed wire. He jumped a 19-foot fence, one of the greatest feats of athleticism in recorded history, and hung himself 2 days before he was going to testify at the House of Commons. 2 days. And he's the guy that I interfaced with. And so when he died in my deal with the bank and all the stuff that we were supposed to do, not all, much of it, we don't know what Giuseppe promised you. Obviously, we don't know. No say. We don't know. Not from nothing. But the Vatican Bank also plays hardball. Super hardball. And it's always in the name of God. It's always in the name of God. Okay. Anything else about that? Any other questions about Andres? Now, we've taken you from the beginning to just a couple weeks ago under Corona, because Corona shouldn't scare you, but for the very reason that the sellers are scared of Corona, but you still have this glazed look. It doesn't matter that you understand. It doesn't matter that you don't know anything. If you don't pull the trigger, and every day that goes by, from the day you leave here, we used to keep a chart. We don't anymore because it was so debilitating. It even made me sick. Every day that goes by that you don't pull the trigger, the probability goes up like 6% every day that you're not going to do it. Every fucking day. 6%. No, you don't do it. 1 day, 6%. 2 days, 12%. 3 days, 18%. Yeah, thank you, and you're never going to do it. In the book, it says if you don't do it in 21 days, what did I say in the book? 21 hours, excuse me. Yeah, 21. I mean, forget about it. Because every day, especially the engineers, you're going to come up with another reason. And the standard deviation from the mean. Oh, fuck, what do we got to figure out? All standard deviation from the mean. Fuck. If you don't know what I just said, it's not important. Or ask her. She explained to you what I'm talking about, standard deviation from the mean. Okay, we're going to watch. Okay, YouTube, thank you.